Welcome to this new video where you'll learn how to replicate the design you see on the screen. It's a well-constructed design suitable for a delivery store. At the top, there's a section where you could select the delivery address. We won't cover this feature in this video series, but you could also search for a restaurant, and there's a list of different items that looks pretty good. We have the image section, on top elements like the logo, store rating, and information such as the store name. There's a minimum purchase amount, a service charge, and the estimated delivery time. So it's an interesting challenge that gives a very unique and attractive appearance to this application. Let's see how to do it. But before starting, do you dream of becoming an expert in .NET development but don't know where to begin? Your journey starts here at Dev School. At Dev School, we unlock the world of .NET development like you've never seen it before. With a wide range of courses and resources, we cover everything from .NET MAUI through C# and Entity Framework to TypeScript, solid principles, design patterns, Azure Bicep, Blazor, AI, and much more. Why choose us? Because at Dev School, we don't just teach, we prepare you for the real world with our hand-on courses, challenging projects, and the support of industry experts. You'll be ready to take on any challenge and stand out in the .NET development field. Whether you're starting from scratch or looking to deepen your knowledge, we have everything you need to take your career to the next level. Join the Dev School community today and take the first step towards your future as a .NET developer. Get a subscription and begin your journey to success with us. Your adventure in the world of development awaits. Let's begin by creating this spectacular page. First, I will go to the Views folder and proceed to create a new item. This item will be a content page of type XAML. Let's call it storesview.xaml. Once our new page has been created, the first thing I'll do is remove the navigation bar by setting navigation page has navigation bar to false. This will prevent the navigation bar from appearing at the top. Another property I will modify as part of the content page is the background color, setting it to 4F3F9B. To get the purple tone you see on the screen. I'll remove the default vertical stack layout and instead create a new grid with a set of rows through row definitions. The first row will contain 30% of the corresponding space of this page, and the second will cover the remaining 70%. Within this grid element, I will create a vertical stack layout. I will set a spacing of 10 units between each of the elements. Inside the vertical stack layout, I'm going to create a label control with a margin of 25, 25, 0,0. Set its font attributes to bold. Also set the font family to bold. We will import this font momentarily. We will set the text to delivery address and the text color to white. Once this tag is closed, we will see how the app is shaping up. To do this, we will go to the app.xaml.cs file and change the initial page to stores view, which is the page we just created. We will launch the application to monitor the changes in real time. Once the application is deployed, we can see the header indicating that a delivery address can be selected for a certain order. Now, we do not want to use the default font, we want to use a different one. To achieve this, I will stop the application and within the resources folder, in the fonts folder, I will paste a set of fonts. Specifically, I have finished importing these fonts related to the Lato font. I have imported the black, bold, italic, and regular versions. I will go to the MAUI program.cs file to register these missing fonts. So in this section of fonts.addFont, I will add the Lato Black, Lato Bold, Lato Italic, and Lato Regular fonts, each with a different alias. Once more, let's run the application to see how these changes we've made look. Ready! With this, we can see that we now have a different font as part of this label control you see on the screen. Having done this, let's go back to the storeview.xaml file, and after this label control, we will create a new grid with a margin set to 25, 10, 0, 0. And column definitions set to auto, asterisk, because we're going to add content inside this grid. Within this grid we've created, let's create a new label control with its font family set to regular. Also a text that says, for example, 1030 Burton Avenue. It's a text we will leave as the default for now. A text color set to white. We will also specify its vertical options set to center. I close this tag, save the changes, and it's the text you can see below the main text we placed earlier. You can see it has a thinner tone. It doesn't look as bold or strong as the text above. Next, after this label we've placed here, we will add an image control, positioning it in column number 1. Let's set a margin to 15, 0, 0, 0. Also, its horizontal options set to start. Vertical options set to center. A width request set to 15 units. Let's close this tag. This image control will allow us to place an icon that we obtain from the icon font source. How do we do this? We will indicate image.source. Within this tag, assign font image source. Set font family to Awesome Solid, which is the font that we have registered in a previous video. We'll also use a glyph property with the ampersand symbol, hash symbol XF078, which is the name of the icon we're going to use, and let's also set the color to white. Close the tag, save the changes. As you can see in the emulator, we now have this icon indicating that we can select this section of the screen to choose a different address. We'll develop this functionality further in a different video later on. Now, let's add functionality so someone can search for a store within the app. How can we do this? Well, after this first grid we see here, the main container, we're going to add another grid container inside. You can see we are still over this vertical stack layout. For this grid's properties, we will set a margin of 25, 10, 0, 0, and define a set of columns. The first with 90% of the space, and the second with the remaining 10%. Inside this grid, we're going to create a border, assign a padding of 0 units, and a stroke shape to make it a rounded rectangle. Let's specify 8, 8, 8, 8. Close this tag, and this will allow us to nest elements with a rounded rectangle. Within this border, we will create a new grid. For its properties, let's indicate column definitions as 0.1 star, 0.9 star. Inside this defined grid, we will first create an image control with its horizontal options set to center, vertical options set to center, and a width request of 20 units. As part of this image, we'll again use the property named source, and we will use a font image source with a font family set to Awesome Solid, and a glyph equal to F002. If I close this tag and save the changes, let's see how this looks in the emulator. You can see that we now have this definition. We have this icon that you can see on the screen. Next, after this image control that we've placed, we're going to place an entry control. We'll put it in column number 1, with a font family set to bold. We'll set a placeholder equal to search a restaurant. Or dish. A placeholder, or rather a placeholder color. This will be equal to 90, 90, 90, and a text color equal to white. We close this tag, save the changes, and now we have a nice looking search control appearance that would serve to search for a restaurant or one of the dishes, with which we have finished the top part of this page, and we will now move on to the part for the collection of restaurants that we would have as part of the application. We will define this section after the vertical stack layout. Notice we have here the main grid, and the first element is the vertical stack layout. So we want this collection of elements to be on the second row. Therefore, after the vertical stack layout, we're going to create a new grid, which we will position in row number 1. Within this grid that we've created, we will indicate that we want a round rectangle with a background color equal to F2, F1, F6, which is this white type color we can see on the screen. We also assign a corner radius with a varying measures for each corner. The top corners will have a value of 25 and the bottom corners a value of 0. Let's see what this looks like on the emulator. This is essentially the container where this collection of different elements will be located. Here we can see that a lot of space is left as part of the application. We can modify the collection of rows in the main container. We will indicate that we want the first section to occupy 20% of the space. The restaurant container section will occupy the remaining 18%. Now we have a better visual appearance. Having created this round rectangle, let's now create the collection view control. As part of this collection view, I will add a set of lines that allow me to define an item source with predefined values. This is so we don't have to bind data just yet. We'll do this at the end of the video. Next, we're going to create a section for the items layout. To do this, we access the property of the collection view called items layout. Here we define what the collection view will look like, this control. In my case, I want it to have a linear appearance. What I'm interested in here is specifying the spacing between items to have a value of 15 units. Likewise, the orientation will be vertical. With this, we have also defined part of the visual appearance of the collection view. Now comes the most interesting and important part, which is defining the property called item template. This item template is a bit more complex. Let's start by defining the data template. Within the data template, a grid with a padding equal to 20, 20, 20, 0. A height request of 250 units to specify how much space each of the elements will occupy. We're also going to define a set of rows. The first will take up 60% of the space, and the second will take the remaining 40%. Inside this grid, we'll first define a round rectangle, which we'll position with a row span of 2. The background will be white, corner radius will be set to 10 units, and we'll also specify a shadow for better appearance, using roundRectangle.shadow. Inside, we specify a shadow with a brush color of CFD0D4, opacity at 0.8, and an offset of 10,10. Let's close this definition. Now let's go to the emulator to see how this change looks. Okay, you can see that we correctly have each section or each container that will store information for each store, giving it a very nice visual appearance. Okay, the next step is to define the internal elements within each section. To do this, after the round rectangle, which is the container or the visual appearance we saw earlier for each element, I'm going to create a new grid layout with its column definitions set to 0.4 asterisk, 0.2 asterisk, and 0.4 asterisk. And I'll also define a set of rows. The first row will be allocated 60% of the space, the remaining 40%. In this new grid, the first thing I'm going to do is create an image control, which I will indicate to have a row span of 2 and a column span of 3. I will also specify an aspect set to fill and set the source to header2.jpg. We haven't imported this image yet. I will apply the changes, and you can see that we still don't have the image because we need to add it. I'm going to stop the application and we'll add this set of images into the resources and the images folder. Okay, once we have added the images to the project and rerun the application, you can see that we now have this beautiful image appearing as part of the header for each item. The next task is to specify that section where we can place information within this header where the image appears. How do we do this? Well, after the image control we've previously created, I'm going to create a new grid. I will specify that it should be located in row number 1. I will also set the margin property to 0,0,0,15. Similarly, I'll indicate a height request of 100 units. Horizontal options set to start. Vertical options set to center. Also, a width request of 100 units. This is because inside this grid, I want to place the logo of each business. As you may remember, to create a rounded image, we can use a border control, which is what I'm going to do. I'll specify a margin of 0,0,0,10. Also, a height request of 70 units. Horizontal options set to center. I specify a stroke shape set to ellipse. And also a stroke thickness of 4. Inside this border, I'm going to create a range of different colors to specifically make a linear gradient brush, which will give us a nicely designed border as part of this collection of elements. For this, I'll specify border.stroke, and within I'll create a linear gradient brush with an endpoint at 0.1. I'll specify a set of gradient stops, so I set the gradient stops offset to 0,0 with a color of FEFEEF. I close this definition, copy it and paste the element 4 times, so in total I'm going to have a set of 5 gradient stops. The next one will be at offset 0.25, the following at 0.5, the next at 0.75, and the last at 1.0. The colors will be as follows. The second one will be EBD570. The third will be FF94C3. The fourth will be A573E4. And the last will be A9E2EE. With these changes made, we can go back to the emulator, and now we can see this element, which doesn't look very good currently because we need to place the content inside this border control. That's what we're going to do next. After this line, where we close the border.stroke, we'll create an image control with horizontal options set to center and a source set to logo1.jpg. I close the tag, return to the emulator, and now we can see this beautiful definition where the store logo is positioned, as well as this attractive border that looks quite good with this application. Okay, now let's define this section on the right side of the image. How do we do this? Well, to simplify the XAML code, I will collapse this section or this container called grid, leaving only this part visible where we have the grid with the header image. After this grid we see here, I'm going to define another grid located on row number 1. I will specify that I want it to be positioned in column number 2. As part of the content of this new grid, I will again define a round rectangle with its corner radius property set to 10. I specify a fill equal to F8, F8, F7. A height request of 35 units. Horizontal options set to center. Vertical options set to center. A width request of 75 units. I close the round rectangle definition. I save the changes. You can see that as part of each element, I've defined this section where we can place content related to each store. As part of the specification of this grid, after the round rectangle, which is solely to visualize the background of this section, I'm going to create a horizontal stack layout because I want to nest elements horizontally. I will specify some properties such as horizontal options set to center and vertical options also set to center. As part of this horizontal stack layout, the first thing I'm going to add is an image control with a margin of 0,0,15,0. I set vertical options to center and a width request of 15 units. This image control will be used to place an icon. Then I again specify an image.source, font image source, font family equal to awesome solid, a glyph set to F005, and a color equal to black. If I close this tag, save the changes, and return to the emulator, you can see that I've actually placed this star icon to show the user the rating of each star. The next step is to display the rating information. How do we do this? Well, after the image control, I'm going to create a label control. I will place it in row number 1, set the font family to bold, give it a text such as 4.5, set the text color to black, and the vertical options to center. Let's see this change in the emulator, and you can see that we now have this nice reference that indicates the rating of each star. With that, we conclude the upper part of each item. The next step is to fill in the information at the bottom, where we can include more details about each store, such as delivery time, average price, and other information. How do we do this? Well, I'm going to go back to the XAML code. I'm going to collapse this main grid. I'll also collapse the round rectangle. Next, I'm going to proceed to place the following code section after this grid that is part of the main grid. So we have the main grid, the round rectangle, a grid where we place the elements at the top. Following that, we're going to create a new grid element. We will configure it as follows. I'm going to indicate that I want to position it in row number 1 with a margin set to 0,10,0,0. I specify a padding of 10 units. Column definitions to create a set of columns. We are going to create 3 columns with exactly the same width. To do this, we place 3 consecutive asterisks. We will also create a set of rows definitions. This time, we'll use asterisk, comma, asterisk to create only 2 rows as part of this grid layout. Within this new grid we've created, I'm going to create a first label control, which will have a column span of 3, font family set to bold, font size set to large, horizontal text alignment set to start, a text equal to the binding of the current item source, and a text color set to black. I'll save these changes, and you can see we now have the main title of the store, which will be located here, below the image. Next, after this label control, I'm going to create another label control, which I will place in row number 1. I indicate that I want it to be in column number 2. I also want a margin of 0,10,0,0. Font family set to regular to apply a different font format. Also set its horizontal options to end. A text that says 30 to 40 minutes. Text color set to black, and vertical option set to start. We close this tag, go back to the emulator, and now we have the second part of the text, which indicates the amount of time a delivery could take. Let's create one last label control which we will place in row number 1, with a margin of 0,10,0,0. Font family set to regular, a text equal to 50.00 minimum, also a text color set to black, and lastly set its vertical options to center. Close this tag, and we now have another information section indicating the minimum amount for this order. The central section still needs to be done. To do this, after the last label control, let's create a horizontal stack layout. Place this horizontal stack layout in row number 1 and also in column number 1. Let's specify a margin of 0,10,0,0. Set its horizontal options to center and expand, and its vertical options to start. Inside the horizontal stack layout we've created, we'll use an image control to place an icon. So set the image height request to 15 units and its vertical options to center. To use an icon from the font, we need to access the source property and use a font image source again, specifying a font family of Awesome Solid, the glyph set to F48B, and a color of black. Let's save the changes, and now you can see that in the center we have this icon that will indicate if there is an extra fee for delivery. After this image control, let's create a new label control. Let's specify its margin as 10,0,0,0. Font family set to regular. Horizontal text alignment set to center. With a text that reads 10.00. We also set its text color to black. Vertical option set to center. If we close the tag and go back to the emulator, you can see that we now have this additional information about this specific store. Okay, and with that, we've finished the graphical interface part for displaying each store's information. Lastly, to make it look a bit more realistic, let's do something quickly. We will create a class that will help us manage the information throughout the app. So I will proceed with the application run. I'm going to go to my project called MAUI Delivery and create a new folder named Models. Within this newly created folder, we'll create a new class named Store. Here, as part of this class, I'm going to paste a set of properties that I've previously prepared. The first is ID, followed by header, logo, name, delivery time, minimum, service fee, and rating. These properties will help us maintain information about each of the stores. And once we've created this class, I'll go to the code behind of this file. That is, I'll open the folder named Views and go to the file named storesview.xaml.cs. First, I'm going to create a public list of type list store, which is the model I previously created. We need to import the missing namespace. The name of this property will be stores. I will indicate that as part of the constructor, I want to invoke a method called loadData, which we have not yet defined. I also want to set the binding context to this, so we have direct access to this list of stores. We haven't created this method yet, so let's do that. Here I'm going to paste a piece of code I've previously prepared, where we essentially create a set of stores, each one with different information taken from the images we imported earlier. Also, each of these stores has a name, a delivery time, among other details. So, once we have this property ready, which is a list, let's quickly review the store view. I'm going to look for the collection view, you can see it here. I'll remove this section of the item source and instead I'll set item source as a direct property and bind it to the property called stores. With this binding that we are doing, we can now change information directly on each of the controls. First, I'm going to change. I'll search for the term header2, which is the image we've set as the main image for each business, and I'll replace it with a binding to the property header, which halts the path to each store's image. I'll also look for the term logo1, as I'm going to change this term to a binding to the logo property. I'll search again for binding dot, which was formerly referring to that static data, and I'm going to replace it with binding name, which is the name of each store. Next, I'll search for the text 30 to 40 minutes, and replace that text with a binding to delivery time. Now I'll search for the term 50.00 and replace this static text with a binding to minimum, applying a string format, specifying that the data will have a currency format, followed by the term minimum. Lastly, I will search for the term 10.00 and replace this static string with a service fee binding, again applying a string format equal to, I specify that the value has a currency format, and with this we have finished this part of creating the bindings. Let's run the application to see how it looks on the emulator. After a few seconds, we can see that we now have a visually appealing appearance for each of the items or each of the stores, now bound with the data model, which results in an application that looks quite good and brings us to the completion of this part.